Need more details? This is the place for you. Need more context? This is the place for you. Need more? The Morning News with Gord Gillies is the place for you.
Brought to you by Ultimate Renovations on 770 CHQR.
I don't care if Monday's blue.
And it's 9:10 now on your Monday morning. Her exhibit is called What Magic? And it's at the Glenbow Museum. Calgary artist Gwenessa Lam took 29 images from the internet, all versions of some sort of house fires, and then followed the story, if you will, of the photo and the journey online. Good morning to you. Thanks for coming in.
Hi, Gord. Thanks for having me.
What did you set out to do when you began this project for yourself?
Well, I had been, at that time, I had been working on an earlier body of work, and I've always been interested in how does the image of disaster resonate with its viewer. And for me, house fires was really interesting in that it's something that we encounter every day, but the way in which you react to it would obviously depend on the context you're in. For instance, as I was sitting and listening to the news hours today in terms of what's happening in Tuxedo, and the fires are more have an increased rate in Calgary right now, would cause one to react to an image of a house fire quite differently than, say, when it's across the world somewhere else. Right. So there's this flexibility in terms of how often we see an image of a house fire, but its impact, the way in which we react to it fluctuates. So
use the example of the one that you sort of based your start on. It was a fire in Georgia, and this visual was of what? So you would, when I came across this image in a local paper online, it's an image of a house fire in flames. And as I was doing my research, what's interesting is actually it's quite hard to find an image of a house fire intact. And you can see there's this draw, right, in terms of why the newspaper, why media would select that type of image. There's something about a fire that's very enigmatic, and the lure of the flame is also very engaging, right? But that image in particular, it's not only a home, but you have the garage that's just slightly open. There's a car in there. So that image in particular becomes representative not just a literal house, but it begins to pull on our ideas of what home is, of everything that we have worked towards, in a way, this dream of what life should be, and then to have it literally ablaze. So in a way, that particular photograph struck me in terms of how it could operate in those planes. But that photo went all over the place, right? And it began to be used in other ways? Yeah. So what was interesting is I was starting to track this image just out of curiosity. It would pop up on the more logical uses, right, in terms of home insurance, companies for fire alarms. So anything that you're trying to, or companies that are trying to protect themselves against fires, right? So really using that image to really stir your emotions. But then over time, it started to leak into really unexpected territory. So some extremes would be used for dream interpretation. Others would be somewhat connected. For instance, in To Kill a Mockingbird, I forgot that there's a scene where there's a house on fire, Miss Maudie's house. So for a period of time, that had a lot of hits where that was used to illustrate an actual story. Right. But it weaves, amazing how it weaves its way. Started from this is a house fire, this is a picture. It weaved its way to become now dream interpretation. I mean, how, it leads to whole different worlds. And it's really quite unexpected too. And what's interesting is just because of the nature of the image and the internet still continuing to proliferate. And that's why at a certain point I just had to stop. So I had been tracking this image for a year. But, and again, the way it also begins to be appropriated and to populate other websites or stories would also be, in a way, a reflection of what's happening at the world in the world at that time. Right. So how did you track the photo, by the way? Well, what's your trick? I worked with, I have to acknowledge, Paul Robert, who is also a colleague of mine at the Alberta College of Art and Design, and he helped build some code that was for him, really simple to be able to collect all the images
within like a folder. So that was one task. One could actually also just spend the time to physically, not physically, but do it by hand.
Yeah.
And so over a period of time, I just began to monitor over a year these images. I had this collection, and it ended up at a point in time being 29. And just to give you some background too, I had also been doing this with some other images, but they would be larger, like 300. So,
okay.
So I began with that sort of collection and began to then literally track down on the website, taking the time to do things that we often don't do. So it was also a response to the way in which we usually navigate the internet, which is a fast clicking. Like, how often would you actually pursue this? But to
find out.
Yeah.
To dig deeper. So what do you hope people who, it's at the Glenbow, it's a huge prestigious thing for you. What do you hope people think about or stop and do when they see your, what magic?
My hope is that through the navigation of those images, it would just give them an opportunity to pause and to think about the way in which an image does function in our life. On one hand, it's the actual image of a house fire, right? How does the mediated image function in our life? But ultimately, I think it's just to be critical and to think about the way in which we receive and see images, particularly on the internet, and to question how they're used.
A little more scrutiny,
yeah,
a little more homework on what you're seeing.
Right. Yeah.
I like the idea. Do you think is our world where it is click, 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 info? Do you think there's room for a pause, or are you hoping you make people think and pause?
I'm hoping. It is hard. It's something I struggle with constantly.
Yeah.
But what was interesting is after going to the project, right, and that's why the exhibition is set up in a way where you do have to slow down and look through the images one by one. And I mean, one could just literally walk in and just spend a second to do that. But I think given the environment that we're in, increasingly I think we have this responsibility to take stock, and when those opportunities do arise, to stop and think about that. So it's an environment that I hope is conducive and that would allow you to do that. But you're right, it's a challenge getting up every day. I mean, you're
bombarded, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Good luck with it. That sounds like a heady assignment, but good luck with it. Congratulations on it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Gwenessa Lam joining us. Her exhibit is at the Glenbow Museum, What Magic? And spend a little time as you take it all in.